rodeoed with him in the late 50s. And I had a family and some children to take care of, and I wasn't good enough to rodeo. I didn't know they had a pay window. So I decided it wasn't profitable for me to stay on the rodeo field, and going to work on Monday morning after riding rough stock was pretty painful most every Monday morning after the rodeo on weekends. So consequently, I said it's time for me to get out of this and do something else lucrative. But anyway, in between that time, Roger would stop by my place and show me these plaster casts and say, "Bob, these are Bigfoot prints." I said, "Well, yeah, they're big, all right." But I really didn't have much interest in it. The only interest I really had in 1964, I got married and I went to Harrison Hot Springs for my honeymoon. And I have to be a little careful how I say this, folks, because I said it on the radio up there and I got in trouble. As we were leaving Harrison Hot Springs, there was a wooden plaque on a big tree out there. It was a Sasquatch face. And my wife looked at me and says, "What is a Sasquatch?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure. It must be a tribe of native. Must be what they call, well, it would be the natives up in that part of the country." And she said, "Well, sure is a big fella, ain't it?" I said, "Well, yeah, this is pretty good size." Well, I didn't know much about this. I kind of let it go by until Roger started coming by with these plaster casts, and he'd bring these little cassette tapes with him to play on a little recorder. And he'd play these tapes to me about people, testimonials of people that were concerned about the Bigfoot. And it got so to the point where I thought, well, they can't all be imagining things, and they can't all be wrong, and so there must be something out there. But I still had too busy a life of my own to put much effort or time into this. Excuse me. So this went on for a year or so, and Roger talked me into going over to Mount St. Helens. He said, "Over there's been lots of footprints and a lot of activity." And he said, "There's actually been disappearance of people up there," which I was just taking Roger's word for this. So we went over there on Labor Day weekend of 1967 and rode in the mountains around. I always took horses everywhere I went because I'm too lazy to walk. But besides, I like horses a lot. Anyway, to make a long story shorter, it started raining over there at Mount St. Helens, and by Sunday afternoon, everything we had was wet. So I said, "This is crazy. I'm not staying over here." So we loaded up and went back to Yakima. That's where I'm originally from, the Yakima area. I went back to work. I was a hot roofer at that time, and I don't know how many of you men out here understand hot roofing, but in the fall of the year, when it gets a little slow for hot roofing, they start laying off the guys that don't have the seniority. Well, I didn't have a whole lot of seniority. I'd only been there a year and a half or so. So Roger come into my driveway there. I think it was probably the middle of the week after Labor Day weekend. He was really excited, and he drove in and he said, "Bob, we got to go to Northern California." He said they found footprints, 3 different sizes of footprints around in the dirt where they had put in a piece of equipment, a tanker. They spotted in with a tractor and left it there. They had road graders and cats up in the mountains attempting to lay logging roads in the higher country. And I naturally said, "Well, I got a job, Roger, and I got cattle and horses and a ranch to take care of." But he said, "Hey, well, think about it." And I said, "Well, I will." So I went and talked to my boss where his hot roof, and he said, "No, hey, go ahead and take off." Because he said, "It's getting slow, and you're the bottom on the totem pole. You're bottom on the list for laying off." And so I contacted my brother and some of my nephews and stuff and got them to take care of my cows and loaded up the horses with, I had a 1-ton Chevrolet dually truck with a 11-foot horse van on it. And so I took Roger down to Northern California, not knowing where I was going. He told me where to go because he had been down in that area before and talked to Jerry Crew and the different ones in that area. So I went in, and we went into a place, over a place called Onion Mountain, down into Bluff Creek, and made a camp there. So we rode for the next 20 days, all through the mountains, many miles, a lot of miles, and in different places where supposedly there might be footprints. But I'll back up just a split. When I got down to where that tank was in that fresh dirt, it had rained really hard. I imagine all the way up down the west coast. So there was nothing there to really identify footprints, just globs in the mud. So I wasn't real impressed about it because I'd never seen a footprint, and that's what I wanted to see. But I could see that there was 3 different sizes by the way the rain had washed them. So that intrigued me enough to stay down there and ride until that October 20th day. And that particular day when we went out, we'd ridden a radius there of probably 12, 14, maybe 15 miles. Well, Roger said, let's just take the pack horse, stay out all night, and the next day we'll go back about 25 miles in from where we'd been riding. And maybe getting a little farther back might be better, because it was a nice fall, sunshiny day, and it was similar to our fall days that we're having at the present time. And the leaves were all turning really beautiful, yellow and gold, and Roger was riding along in front of me with his horse, filming the scenery, just everything there, and filmed some of the pictures of me dragging the pack horse up through there. So we were just riding up the creek bed, and any of you that know what a root system of a downfall tree when they're washed down or blown down is, you'll know what I'm talking about. So there's a big downfall tree there, the root system up, and the creek had come up like this, rerouted itself around this creek downfall tree. We were riding up the creek like this to the north, would be east and west. And Roger was riding in front of me about 3 horse lengths on a little horse that was pretty spooky and pretty snappy. I call him, he was just a lot of little horse. He spooked easy, and so Roger's horse spooked pretty good. And he was trying to get that camera out of his saddlebag on the left-hand side, and the horse was rearing and jumping. Finally, he got the camera out, and by then I saw the creature standing by the creek. And I thought, oh, yeah, these things really do exist. But things happened so quickly after that, I can tell you about it, but you probably would just about have to be there. Any of you guys out there hunting elk or deer, and a big old bull elk jump out of the trees about 15, 20 feet from you, a lot of things happen very rapidly. And that's the way this all happened. The creature started walking away from us immediately. And the film footage that you have seen, the ones that have seen that film footage that Roger and I shot down there in 1967, you'll see that at the beginning of it, it's real blurry, and what caused that, Roger ran across the creek. The creek was probably 12 to 14 inches deep in water in the fall, and about 12, 14 feet across. And then there was a little bank on the other side, not real steep, just a little bank, and Roger was running with the camera up to his eyes, and he stumbled and fell on his elbows when he got to that little bank. Well, he got up and he started again, and I just let the pack horse go on back down the trail, because my horse was about all I could do to handle my horse. And he was a big roping horse, had been roped on a lot, and so I could handle him quite well. And I just sat there kind of thinking, oh my God, this is really true. And so Roger wanted to relocate, the creature was moving kind of northwest on this, what we call a sandbar, later. It was just a sandy, loamy soil that had washed down all of the mountains from the flood in 63 and 64 down in that area, and then a log jam had jammed up the creek in the narrow spots between the two hills. So by the log jam backing up the soil, it created kind of a loamy type soil that was, you could make a pretty good track in it, in other words. The creature was walking right through that and on up, and Roger said he wanted to relocate, so he said, "Bob, can you cover me?" Well, I knew what he meant, because we both had rifles in our saddle scabbards. And we had already talked about, if we ever saw one, would it be necessary to shoot or not to shoot? And I'd never seen one, never really knew what was supposed to really look like in a body type. I'd seen pictures of what they called the head. It was drawings the same as the Sasquatch I saw in Canada. So I rode across the creek, and the creature was still walking away from me. And I took my rifle out and dismounted, because I knew if it turned around and came back the size it was, I knew it could do some damage, because this thing had, well, you can see how it is, so much muscle, so big. And by then I knew that I wouldn't have a chance. I never raised the rifle to my shoulder, but I took it out and stepped down off my horse. And that footage, I think it's 352, where it walks like this and kept right on striding. That's when I stepped down off the horse. So that's when I say she, now I know that it was a female. But at that time, I had no idea what a female would look like. A male, I wouldn't know the difference. And so that's that famous one that they use for a lot of different advertising, and they just use it a lot because it's open for public domain. And folks, that was when my nightmare started in my life, and I went through quite a few years of being very disappointed that I was even down there. And then coming to these things like this, and seeing you folks and meeting people like you folks, I'm glad I stayed with it from 2003 on until this present day. Thank you for being here, and thank you for tolerating me.